It's great to be here. Thanks again for the introduction. I went to school here about 100 years ago when it's still called Itawamba Junior College. That's been a while, but it's great to be back on the campus, and I've got a lot of friends over here. It's a long way from Fulton to Hollywood. We went out to sign for the cast of Criminal Minds. There are so many good things that happened to us. I began to write after I retired, and I decided to write a trilogy, written as fiction, but based on experiences I've had in life, and the good, the bad, and the tragic. How many folks in here have finished Ghostly? How many are reading Ghostly? Okay. Before I forget and get into the talk and discussion, would ask y'all if you would, if you liked it, to please go to Amazon and leave us some reviews there. Those help us with Amazon stocking formula to keep those fresh reviews coming in. And also encourage you, if you'd like to be put on our feed, to friend me on Facebook at Merle Temple, or either send me your email to merletemple@bellsouth.net. We'll do a lot of announcements, and we haven't publicly announced it yet, but we're going to have a party in Tupelo in late April, and one of the folks from Criminal Minds is coming to stay with us. And we're going to have a big reception for him and a joint book signing with him. And so if you ever wanted to kind of meet any of those folks from there and ask stories, ask him to tell stories about all the people there, that would be a good opportunity. So please feel free to friend us on Facebook. We do a lot of interesting posts. Like Ken said, I was raised in this part of the country and left after high school. I caught a train in Corinth a week after high school and went to Washington, D.C. 18 years old, never been out of the state except kind of go down to Panama City with my parents for vacation, and went up there and went to work for the FBI as a fingerprint technician. And it was quite an education in and of itself to be up there, and met a lot of interesting folks up there. Got mugged 3 times, got my nose broken, I got stabbed, had a gun pulled on me, and I was just out walking the streets. And I met J. Edgar Hoover and some other folks up there. It was an interesting time. Came home to finish. I knew I had to get in college. Came home to IJC here, and then later went to Ole Miss. And just as I was graduating at Ole Miss, in the early 70s, President Nixon had declared the first war on drugs. And I decided that must be the place for me. So I headed to Jackson and was recruited into the Bureau of Narcotics as an agent. For those of y'all who've read Ghostly, you'll see a lot of interesting things in there. Even though the books are written as fiction, they're all drawn from my life, as I said, and you'll see a lot of interesting things that happened to me when I was working undercover in the early days, and there weren't very many of us. And so if you got in trouble, the posse wouldn't come in because there wasn't a posse, and you're pretty much on your own. And I was working undercover in South Mississippi, and I was taken hostage by 2 heroin dealers who decided they were going to keep their product and just kill me and take my money. And so they pulled guns on me at midnight out in a little place way out at the swamp. Is where the highway ended and the blacktop ended and the dirt road ended and the little path up through the woods ended. Mall scraping across the top of your cars. All the things suddenly that you've seen in your nightmares, all the things that go bump in the night, suddenly became real in this little wood frame house. And I walked in and they put a shotgun in my stomach and a pistol to my forehead, and they began to debate where to dump my body after they killed me. One of them, if those of y'all who've read it and will read it, you'll see in the book that one took out double-edged Gillette razor blades and began to chew them up, to bite them in two, and chew them up and actually swallow the double-edged Gillette razor blades. and he began to bleed profusely, blood foaming up, bubbling up at the corner of his mouth, running down on his throat and his chest. And he put his hand in the back of his mouth and pulled out a fingerful of blood, and he said, "Want some?" I said, "I don't believe I care for any." And then he took a whole box of long-stem kitchen matches and lit the whole flame and put his head down as the blood was gushing out and swallowed the whole flame. And it was that moment my whole life flashed before my eyes. There's something when you believe you're about to die that triggers something in your brain. And I saw images of myself when I was a toddler with my parents, things buried in my subconscious that I could not recall otherwise. It was actually a beautiful experience. I wouldn't recommend the stimulus that it took to create those images, but it was actually beautiful. And prayed a lot that night, and I won't go into more of it except to encourage you to read the book if you haven't. And then I became an investigator. I came out from undercover, and we investigated an organized crime setup in North Mississippi. And it was a pretty bad situation. A lot of the Dixie Mafia, we called it back in those days, and the Italian Mafia, and some of the real-life original people from the Walking Tall movies from McNairy County, Tennessee, some pretty bad folks. We hit them, and they took it very personally, and they hired 2 contract killers to lure me out and kill me. And I was going to meet them, and I had an informant who called the house, talked to my first wife who's now deceased, and told her to get a hold of me and tell me it was a setup, they were going to kill me, and the police radio had gone out and highway patrol couldn't raise me. But I had a bad feeling about it, and I'd taken my gun out of my shoulder holster and put it underneath my belt. Before I arrived, there was not one who was supposed to be there, there were 2, and they were pretty bad guys. I remember finding out who they were, and I won't go into all of that story either, just to say it was pretty bad. It was touch and go, everybody had their guns, and so forth. And then when I was promoted, I became the first captain in the agency over North Mississippi. We were doing a heroin deal in Columbus, and those of y'all who read the book, that's the way, those chapters are exactly how it happened. No fiction much to speak of in there, that's just how it happened. And we had that 5-bus set up for people we bought heroin from before, my men, undercover agents. And we were going to do a large deal, lure out their backers, and wouldn't trust front men with a lot of product and a lot of money. And so we had that set up, and I was going to meet the agents in Starkville to finalize the deal. And I left my office in Tupelo and ran down to my car. And when I jumped in my car to crank up and leave, put my hand on the gear shift, spirit filled up my car, came in all around me, all through me, and commanded me to go back and get the bulletproof vest. And it scared me to death. I never experienced anything like that before, and I thought I'd lost my mind. And I said, well, I don't know where that came from. I said, I'm working too long, for too many hours, or I'm hallucinating, I'm losing my mind, I don't know. And we don't have any reason to believe it's going to be any more dangerous than usual. And the agents undercover didn't like to wear those vests because they were bulky and hard to conceal, even though it was in November and very cold and people were wearing coats. And we only had bulletproof vests in those days that would stop up to a 38 caliber handgun. They didn't have any armor in the vest. So I tried to ignore it, put my hand on the gear shift, and again, the spirit came back in the car, wrapped all around me, and commanded me, it wasn't optional, to go back and get the bulletproof vest. And I said, okay, out loud. I went back and got the vest, met with the agents to finalize the deal and how we would stay close to them on surveillance and provide the backup and so forth. And I told them I want you to wear the vest. They didn't want to. I said, no, I want you to wear the vest. Don't ask me why. Just wear the vest. Long story short, we went to do the deal in Columbus. I asked them to keep it downtown so we have buildings to hide, streets and places to hide behind, and surveillance so we could stay really tight on them. But the deal got away from them. They went out into the countryside, and down south of where the W is, the college there. And there was a big wound around, and there was the road was up on a high embankment and depressions on either side and leading off in the swamps. And there was a railroad that passed it right up through here ahead of them. And in that one depression, there was a high railroad trestle there, and there was a clump of pine trees right there by the railroad trestle. And what we didn't know was they had a sniper planted right behind the pine trees. And we had to stay back a bit because there was nothing to conceal us. So we had agents on this side of the deal, agents on the far side of the deal, and we were listening on a body mic on the agents, and it was chopping, it was cutting in and out and in and out, and I was saying ugly words about our procurement people who got us inferior to transmitters that could mean life or death. And so, and then we heard them begin to do the buy bust, to buy the drugs and arrest the people on the scene. We heard it cutting in and out as they were saying, you know, you're under arrest, you're under arrest. And just then, you know, when it came back up, we heard, you know, top. And I said to the chief of intelligence with me, it's close, it says there's that gunfire. And then the agents on the far side were really under fire. And we came across a bridge and were caught in a crossfire there and didn't know where the good guys were, where the bad guys were, and bullets firing everywhere, gun smoke just hanging in the air. That day became this terrible storm. And you could see, look up at the sky. I don't know what I'd ever seen anything like that. You know, it was just like there was a storm and these clouds that were moving in, just trying to squeeze every bit of light out of the world. And it felt like the intersection of heaven and hell, you know, that day. And we were very disoriented, and then the female agent who was with the male agent on the scene to do the buy, she shot one of the violators who reached in to draw a weapon out, and she was very upset naturally, calling me on the radio saying, Jerry's hit bad, her partner was hit bad. And I got to get him to the hospital, and I told her, go to the hospital, go, and everybody was firing, you know, everybody, the agents were scared, and plus one of their own had just been shot, and they were just firing at shadows, and finally I told them to cease firing, but, you know, we're shooting at ghosts, and we didn't know, and we finally decided the sniper had fled, and you can read about it in the book, and but I made my way to the hospital, and went in and arrested the violator who had come there for treatment that she had wounded, comforted her best I could. She was probably 21, 22 years old, but she looked like she was about 90. You know, the weight of the world was on her. And you can imagine, you just shot somebody and you just saw one of your best friends hit multiple times by high-powered rifle fire. And then I went into the ER where they were cutting the clothes off of my friend and my agent. And the white bulletproof vest that the Spirit had commanded me, the God had commanded me to go back and get, was soaked crimson in blood. And it was a hard time. And the doctor said, look at this, Merle. He said, one round struck him in his lower extremities, one slice from his arm. And this one, he put his hand up into an entry wound. He had bigger hands than mine, and he put him up to this big entry wound right here. And he said, look at this. He said, this round struck him in the chest, and it penetrated the vest, because the vest wasn't designed to stop a high-powered rifle, but it took some of the punch out of it, and it deflected it, so that it went in behind his right breast and skidded around the barrel of his rib cage and popped out behind his left breast. He said, Merle, if he hadn't had that vest on, it had taken out his heart and lungs. He'd been dead before he hit the ground. I get chill bumps now. It's almost 40 years ago. Got chill bumps that day. I hear the shuffle of angels' feet around us that day, and I knew that God was with us. And so it went on like that, and you'll see a lot of those stories. There's fiction in Ghostly. I'd say 60 to 70% of Ghostly is taken from things that really happened. And in book 2 and book 3, we'll flash back to tell some more stories that we didn't have room or the right place for in a Ghostly shade of pale. And so a lot of things are It's amazing when you're out at night, under cover of darkness, you see people do things they shouldn't be doing, and it's amazing what you see, when you're out. And I tell you, when you've been out at midnight on a tip, and you see the big car come out of the fog, coming up I-55 south of Jackson, out of New Orleans, and you follow it, and you see the big car pull up at the governor's mansion at midnight, and you see Carlos Marcello, the most powerful godfather in the country, who many still suspect being involved in the assassinations of President Kennedy and his brother Robert Kennedy. You see him get out and walk in as an honored guest, spend 2 hours along with our governor. Not much else surprises you, about what people do. And so a lot of that is in our books, and I hope you see in the books there's so many threads, I think, in the books, and we've been so privileged to get so many good reviews on the books, and really haven't got any bad reviews to speak of. And every book's not for everybody. Doesn't mean to say that you couldn't read it and say, well, it just wasn't for me, because that's just a personal taste. But we've really been really fortunate to get a lot of good reviews, and somebody wrote the other day, an editor of the paper wrote and compared the writing to Thomas Wolfe. And I told him, I said, that's the first I've ever heard of that, but I said, it sure looks good on the book jacket, and when we post up some of these reviews we've gotten, but people have been so kind to us, and we've gotten so many and continue to get, I got a little private message last night. We get private messages on Facebook, and emails, and letters from people writing us from all over, telling us, what the book meant to them, and how it changed their lives, or how it spoke to them, and how they hadn't read a book like this in a long, long time. A book that doesn't have any profanity in it. Even though I think, y'all might disagree, I think it's a pretty gripping book, but we chose early on, I did, to ignore what the industry was asking and what all they know to do, and that's to, just throw a lot of gratuitous profanity and graphic intimacy and, things like that in the book. I'll tell you, when they first started reading the book before it was published, some people in the industry said, wow, this is pretty good, but you need some neon in it. And I said, neon? I said, how do you define neon? And they sent me some of my writing back with just the worst profanity you ever say. Y'all probably have seen it, but the worst profanity I could imagine to sprinkle throughout my writing. And I told them, no, I can't do that. Can't do that. And then they said, well, how about, could you add some vampires to it? Vampires are hot then. I said, well, we've got a lot of bad people, I'm not sure any of them were certified vampires, even that one who ate the razor blades. He might be close, but I said, no, they're so formula driven. They want to copy what was hot last week. And I said, no. And then they also asked me, they said, you might not want to mention God. You might offend somebody. I said, let me see if I understand. Profanity good, graphic intimacy good, vampires good, but God not good? And I said, no, I can't do that. I said, I'm writing books that if my mother and my English teacher were still alive, I wouldn't be ashamed for them to see it. And when I first went down to Nettleton before the book came out, I was speaking at the Lions Club down there, and we had this, everybody revered, or a lot of my old friends were down there, and revered our English teacher, Ms. L.B. Johnson. And Ms. L.B., everybody called her, she was tough. She was tough. We didn't appreciate her until later. Y'all will appreciate your English teachers later on when you get into some situations where you'll remember that you're falling back on things that were demanded of you out of love. And they said, wow, wouldn't Ms. L.B. be so proud to know one of her students had turned out to be an author? And I said, yes, she would be so proud and so surprised it was me. And so I wish she was still alive, that I could take it to her and everything. But I've met so many English teachers, out on the road, and we got our first call one day from Winston Academy down in Louisville. And I said, Mr. Temple, do you know that we're using Ghost of Shaded Pale in English classes all the way down to the 8th grade? And I said, wow, really? I said, wow, that's great. She said, would you come speak? And I said, oh yeah, I'd be glad to. And then I told my wife, I said, hey, Judy, you won't believe it. They're using Ghostly all the way to the 8th grade. And then I went, oh my, English teacher's looking closely at my writing. You never get over the fear of those red pens coming out. And I've met a lot of English teachers that say, oh, Merle, that's so yesterday. We don't use red ink anymore, we use purple. They said, red is so judgmental. So we just had a great time with that. We've been everywhere speaking, and like I said, get the greatest notes. A lady just contacted me with a private message and said her son was coming out of a deep valley of drug abuse, and Ghostly was the first novel that he read, and it was so important to him, and he would call her every night telling her what happened in this chapter and that chapter. And a lady who was had cancer in later stages. We just went out recently to see her in the hospital because she wanted to meet Michael, who's based on me, of course, in the book. And I went out and spent 3 hours with her, and she had both books on her bed, by her bedside in the hospital. And another lady in Jackson posted on Facebook and said her husband had died, and she was struggling with that loss. And so then she was driving on the interstates around Jackson, and a gray van passed her, and she said, that was just like a van that Michael had played. Would have been out doing surveillance in Ghost of Shaded Pale. And then she calls and she said, about my husband, she said, I think I'm getting better. I haven't thought of him in maybe a half hour. And that's the last line in Ghostly. And then she put, I just can't get that book out of my mind. Can't tell y'all what this means to a writer to get these, and we get a lot of these. It's why writers write, or at least the reasons they should write. And because when you first write a book, you don't have any idea, if anybody's going to like it or not, and it's pretty tough writing a novel. I've done a lot of writing in my life, but writing a novel is a different kind of thing. And when we first sent it to Jim Clemente at Criminal Minds in Hollywood, I knew his cousin. I said, Jim, would you read this manuscript and tell me if you think it's any good, or if I should do humanity a favor and burn all copies in a mysterious midnight ceremony or something. And he said, sure, we're filming, and it's going to might take a bit, but I'll do it. And so a couple of months went by, and I knew not to ask again. And one day I logged on, and there in my inbox sent the email, and I was afraid to open it. Afraid he's going to say, why'd you waste my time with this dribble? Didn't give up your day job, did you? And so I opened it and said, sorry it's taken so long. We've been filming Criminal Minds and filming some specials. He said, and I'm not quite done, but I just want to stop and tell you, he said, you're not only a great writer, you're a great writer of American literature. That's what this is, a big crime story is literature. And he said, come to Hollywood, I want to represent you. And so that was a big, big break for us. And so we loaded up the Murano with about a ton of books. I exceeded the weight limit, I found out later, for that Nissan. And we didn't have any bounce left going out on I-40. We hit a bump, we just ka-thunk. There was no bounce left, but it's so many books there. And we went out there and went to Criminal Minds and signed for the cast and met them, watched them film. They were so nice to us. And went to a lot of major crimes, a spinoff of Closer, and had dinner with them on a lot. Met Tony Dennison, who I used to watch way back for y'all's time, when he was in Crime Story, a real classic story in the 80s on TV that Michael Mann did. And all that was a thrill, and I had an hour on KTLA radio, a huge radio station, in drive time. And I went down to Beverly Hills, Criminal Minds and set up an interview on this Insider TV show. And we were riding through Beverly Hills, looking at all the iconic images there. I looked at my wife and I said, Judy, I said, we are the Beverly Hillbillies. you know, and that's a little before y'all's time. And we went there, and Mel Gibson's son, Mike me, and powdered my head and my face. I'm not sure I didn't look too shiny, and looked just like his daddy did back in the Mad Max days. And so I signed a book for his daddy, had a great hour-long interview there with the sister of the creator of Mad Men on TV. And wound up signing a book for Robert De Niro while we were out there. And then we went down to Culver City, where a lot of the studios are, and we had a 3-hour dinner with the producers and buyers for producers of Saving Private Ryan, The Patriot, and 2012 blockbuster movies. And they also own Criminal Minds. And so people would pay anything to get 15 minutes with them because of Jim Clemente. I had 3 hours with them down there, and that was a thrill. It was all very surreal. It was like a fairy tale, and we just tried not to embarrass the state of Mississippi. And they asked me on that TV interview, they said, "What is it, Mississippi?" I said, "It's something in the water. All these great writers, you know, are coming out of Mississippi." And I said, "Well, we honor the art of storytelling, particularly oral storytelling in the South. And for those of you who read Ghostly, you can see that I used my real grandmother's name, Pearl. I kept it in the book, and she was the one who was always telling me stories as I was growing up. She'd call me into her room, and she'd tell me stories from yesterday and make history come alive. And so I think I got a little bit of it from Pearl, from all those great stories she told me, and the power of storytelling, and how you can paint pictures and reach people with good stories. So we had all that happen to us, and things began to really move for us after that Association of Criminal Minds. Criminal Minds called me when we had our first big book signing, and they said, "Congratulations." They said, "You deserve what's happening to you." They said, "Soon the whole world will know what we know, what a great writer you are." They said, "Can we say we discovered you?" I said, "After all y'all done for me, you can say anything you want to." I said, "You can say you found me unconscious on the side of the road, revived me, and I began to write if you want to." And so they're nice folks, and we plan to go back and sign a book too. And another reason that I would love for y'all to friend me on Facebook, I'll keep harping on that, and to do a review for us on Amazon if you would. We haven't announced it yet, but Jim Clemente is coming here for Criminal Minds next month. And we're going to have a big book signing together in Tupelo. We're going to have a big party. And I'll be announcing it on Facebook for all of y'all who'd like to meet somebody from that long-running 10-year show and talk to him. And he's a fascinating guy. He passes on everything that goes on the air for authenticity. And he's a writer. He just wrote the season-ending episode. A little bit of a cliffhanger, he told me. And they're filming a spinoff of Criminal Minds too now. I didn't ask him who's going to be in it or anything. I don't press him too hard. And he's an interesting guy. You'd love to meet him. He's fascinating. He was one of the top FBI profilers, and he was a first responder at Ground Zero of 9/11. And like so many of them, he got cancer because when they responded, they didn't have the correct filters, and they were breathing all that dust when the towers collapsed, and had all those carcinogens in them. And he got cancer and had to have a bone marrow transplant. And later, because of the treatment they gave him, there was some calcification around his heart, and he had a massive heart attack and flatlined for an hour. And give up on you in 23 minutes legally, and kept working on it. Thought he was still in there, and he came back with no brain damage. You know, got something for Jim to do, but he's a great guy, and he's a much sought after speaker everywhere, all across the country, and so it would be a real treat and privilege, I think, to just for people to come and meet him and in a relaxed atmosphere. I think we may have a party at the Hilton there in Tupelo. So that's a little extra incentive if you'd like to meet him. To a friend me on Facebook, we'll be announcing that real soon, because hopefully we'll do that. He'll be here in the last part of April. So looking forward to that. He's looking forward to seeing him again. he's been a true friend to us and given us some big, big breaks by calling us out to Hollywood. After we were in Hollywood, other people began to call, and went over to Clarksdale, and I had private dinner at his private table with Morgan Freeman, and sang songs with Morgan. He's a much better singer now, and a funny guy, nice guy, had a lot of questions about Ghostly, and we just, he's got his own production company. And so as soon as the screenplay, which Jim and I are working on now, is done, we're going to take that screenplay directly to Morgan and let him read it, because I think I can deal with Morgan. I don't want Hollywood to come in the back door and do what the book industry tried to do to me in the front door, and that's to trash it up. And I'd rather not ever see it made into a film than to be something that the book was not. And so I think I can deal with Morgan on that, because he's from Mississippi and he likes good Mississippi stories. And this is a good Mississippi story. And plus, for those of y'all who read the book, I think he'd be perfect for the nightclub owner on Beale Street that befriends Michael Parker, the agent. Not necessarily a good guy, but not totally bad, and had a lot of depth to him. And I told them, the screenwriters, I said, we might want to enhance that role a little bit, in the screen version, since Morgan will be looking at it. So if he, if he decides to pick it up for a movie, and how great that would be, and even how much better it would be if he decided to actually star in it. Wow, would that be something? And he's a great actor, one of the great actors of our time, I think. And so we'll see what's happened, but a lot of different people have called us here and there, and we're just waiting to see. We get all kind of calls asking us. I'll tell you how it is when you're an author who's not backed by a big publishing house. You have to wear a lot of hats. Somebody called today and they said, Mr. Temple, we've been hearing so much about you. We'd like to speak with your publicist. I said, you are. We changed my hats here. And so we work a lot of hours, but we love it, and we just travel all over and meet the greatest people and hear miracles people share with us, and book signings, and just meet the nicest people. And we were down in Mayville the other day speaking to about 600 students down there. I love to be around students, especially younger students. They just pretty much say whatever comes into their heads, and they don't have any guile or deceit. That's so refreshing. And so they came up and they said, we're glad you came. I said, you're not boring like most of our speakers. And I said, well, I have an advantage on them. Most of them were held hostage, and they weren't in gun battles and all that kind of stuff. And so we're truly blessed. I began to write this book and to just kind of wandering in the dark, for a while. I'd written a lot in my life, technical papers, op-ed pieces when I was in the corporate world later, and political speeches. I ran across probably 5 presidents in my life, and met a lot of iconic figures out of the 20th century. And people say, well, you've got a gift, you should try the Great American Novel. And I decided I would, and I found out it's pretty hard. It's different. Speaking other voices and having a big complex book with a lot of threads and making them all come together to end, and with integrity and harmony, and remembering, something that you write on page 350 has to be true to what you were saying on page 3 or 35, and the names and associations and the ages and the nicknames and all that, to bring it all home is kind of a tricky thing. And so we learned a lot, kind of sketched it, outlined it. Any aspiring writers in here? Oh, yeah, good. And anytime if you want to ask me anything, just friend me on Facebook and private message me. People, we all help each other. Everybody's at a different stage along with their journey as a writer. And there's some really good author forums on LinkedIn. KB Shaler, a friend of mine who moderates one of those, And if you look for KB Shaler and join her group, and everybody tries to help everybody, and I'm so busy it's hard to get in there as much as I'd like to anymore, but we do. We all say, no, don't go there, don't spend your money there, you get no return on it, or don't deal with them, they'll cheat you, and they won't do what they promise, and don't use that printer, don't use that publisher, and it's a treacherous world when you get into the book world a bit, but so rewarding when you find your way. And there's so many options today for good writers. Some who just choose to go their own way because they don't want to compromise with some of the big publishers and do very well. And a lot of famous stories about people who went their own way and their books took off and became underground hits, and next thing you know, they're selling lots of books and getting movie deals and that kind of thing. So feel free to ever ask me if you ever want to ask anything about the process. But I began to sketch it out, and I took that name, A Ghostly Shade of Pale. I took it from an old song back in the 60s, a real classic song. It's kind of held up through the years called A Whiter Shade of Pale. And I stretched it to A Ghostly Shade of Pale because Frederick, the main character in there, who a lady in Australia told me gave her nightmares after she read the book, he suffered from many things, and he was from albinism was one, and so he was a ghostly shade of pale, and a pretty evil guy. And so we stuck with that title all the way through and began to sketch it out, knew where we wanted to start, knew where we wanted to go. And when you're drawing from memory, it's good, and at the same time, it can be challenging because, when you remember something, you want to honor whoever it is that inspires a character in a book, but you don't want to go so far that it disrupts the flow or the integrity of the book, but you don't want to lose the connection with what inspired you to begin with. And you'll find too, if those of you who write, when you write something, you'll look at it, you'll struggle with it, and then you'll finally say, well, that's pretty good. It's hard to get that down, to bridge through that one chapter coming into some other chapters or other threads. But then you'll walk away from it, you'll come back and you'll say, really, no, that's not very good. I can do better. And so you reach deeper, you start digging deeper. And sometimes when you're drawing from memory, it's pretty painful to really even dig up bones and embrace that pain in order to fuel the writing, to make it so intriguing and so gripping and so moving that people will identify with it. And so it's a real interesting process, but it's always to come back and look at it and say, if I'm going to let that go out, I can do better than that. I can dig deeper and pay the price, whatever price I have, to create something that will endure and not just be another throwaway item in a throwaway world. If that's all I could write, I just wouldn't write. If I could just write the same stuff, you get some of these books and people say, oh, I've read this plot 100 times before, I know where it's going, and everything, but they don't write that about our books. They write, wow, I had no idea what was going to happen, because it's based on memory and things of actual events. So it's very hard to predict. And so that's a little bit of that process, and we get these letters from people around, and we go to book clubs sometimes. Love book clubs. Book clubs are filled with people who just absolutely love to read. I mean, they honor and cherish books, which y'all should too. And we went to one, and they came out and said, we have a few questions for you. They pulled out 2 legal sheets, typed, single-space typed. They knew more about the characters than I did. I mean, they were living and breathing people to them. And I sat there and listened to them for a while, and they were talking to each other before they asked me if they were right. They were debating, well, I think this character did this, and I think this character did that. And you remember when he took off his brown jacket? And I listened, I said, wow, you people are another reason the writer's right. And one thing that's common in our books that you'll find when you're writing is, our descriptors are so important. When I wrote the first draft, of it. There were so many first drafts. I looked at it and I thought, wow, I just hate it. It's terrible. It's the worst thing that's ever been written. It's flat and lifeless. Who would read it? And I walked away from it, and I came back, and I began at page 1, and I sat down all the way from beginning to end. I added descriptors, and as I added descriptors, the characters began to just pop up off the page, to be living and breathing characters. And suddenly you could see what they saw, feel what they felt, hear what they heard. And as my wife often says, when Michael is driving down the dirt road, you can taste the dirt. And that's what you want, is to put your reader right at the foot of the action. So I could go on and tell you all just so many things that have happened to us. And, Rented World, the sequel to Ghost of Shaded Pale, is out now, and I'm writing the final chapter in the trilogy now called The Redeemed. We've been so blessed. Barnes & Noble and Tupelo, Ghost of Shaded Pale is the all-time best-selling novel in the history of that store. They've never seen anything like it. Of course, I'm from this area, but the word of mouth from readers around here is just curious. And they keep a permanent display right at customer services of our books. And they just keep selling out and keep selling out. And Ghost Needle has been out almost 2 years. In addition to being an all-time bestseller, it was in the top 4 Christmas gifts this last Christmas, and it just now again jumped back into #1 in current sales. And it's just who would have ever thought it? I wouldn't have ever thought it. And but we love it. I love to go by there and just walk through like I did this weekend and meet people from all over North Mississippi and West Alabama and Southeast Tennessee that come into that store. And Kroger just picked up the books, and we've done signings with Kroger stores. Another thing the experts said would never happen, couldn't happen, and it did happen. And oh gosh, got a note from the big 30,000 member Baptist church at Bellevue in Memphis. Adrian Rogers used to be so famous there until he passed away as their pastor. They have both books in the library. They stay checked out all the time, and they actually wore out the first copies of Ghostly they had. We sent them some more. They were trying to bind them and package them or whatever to keep them from falling apart. And I said, no, that's what we want. We want them to be worn out by reading. And so we anecdotally, we think that every copy of Ghostly that goes out, this has held pretty steady over the last couple of years. We believe that 6 to 8 people read every copy that goes out, because that's what people tell us. And some people get mad, they come back for another copy because somebody didn't return their copy. And so that's really unusual. And I looked, and there's this umpteen resellers on Amazon all over the country selling used and new copies. I don't know how they're getting them. People say, aren't you mad? You're not getting any royalties off those. I said, no, I'm not mad at all. I said, I want people to read the book. That's the whole point. And get the messages we have in the books. And I looked on eBay, these people, they're auctioning off the books on eBay. And a dealer in Australia and one in England claimed to have 10 pristine first edition hardbacks. Where did they get them? I don't know. How does that work? What a world we live in. You look around and you see all of this. It's just amazing. You think, well, this is just a story I sketched out. And now, boom, it's all over. It's all over. And libraries are picking it up too. So I'd love to answer some questions from y'all. Any questions y'all want to ask? Easy, hard, tougher the better. I like it. So who's got some good questions I can answer? Everybody don't go at once. No questions? Oh, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. Any questions about, if you read the book about Michael or about Clay or Frederick or any of the main characters in the book? I'd love to talk about it if y'all have any questions at all about the writing process. Anything? Yes, ma'am.
What did you want to write about yourself, and what did you want to get that story out there? What was that initial thing? What was the initial
Oh, I think with me, probably, I've always wanted to write a book. Didn't know if I ever would or not. I had so many interesting things happen to me, 3 or 4 lives in one that I lived, good, bad, and very, very tragic. And I wanted to tell a good story, an intriguing story, but also embed between the lines in that story warnings to people, you know, about the danger and the darkness in this world. That's why I call it a rented world. This is not our home, it is passing through. And to tell them that all that's necessary to lose your soul in the world, to paraphrase Thoreau, is to be turned around once with your eyes closed. And that's how quick you can lose yourself and in the world. And start, living for the here and now and very transient things that'll be over with and gone before you know it. And so we want people to read those books, and a lot of people do, and they write us, and say the kindest things, about, I didn't understand about corruption in the world. I didn't understand, I thought that maybe this person who I think you were writing about in politics, I thought they might have been okay. Turns out they were not okay. And expose a lot of the hypocrisy in the world, and try to show it as it is. And because so many people are feeding you false narratives constantly. And so this is a mission and a ministry for us too, to warn people, not to lose yourself here. And I will say too that when you go back and you write from memory, you discover things about yourself, and you confront things about yourself that you might not really want to confront. So it's very cathartic, and you can very cleansing. And my wife has seen me writing before at my keyboard, and she would see tears pouring out of my face, and she said, "You're killing yourself." I said, "No, I'm just cleaning out closets in my mind. Thought I cleaned them out, but I haven't." And so, I said, "It'll be good for me in the end." And I think you make sense of a lot of things, and that maybe you hadn't had time or willingness to think deeply about, and to get really quiet. And so I guess that's a little bit of that answers your question. Any other questions? That's a great question. Yes, ma'am. I love quotes, and in this book too, in Rented World, I use many more quotes than I did even in Ghost of Shade of Pale, maybe too many. But I think they set the mood for the chapter. They set the backdrop. Music is very powerful too. Because a lot of those guys, songwriters, are poets, and when somebody, say, from my generation, or a little younger than me, or whatever, and they, number one, too, not only set the mood for the chapter, but also for the time period you're writing in, and people can go, "Oh, wow, I remember when that song was out, I know right where I was." And that's what songs do. They're very powerful. And my first publisher, asked me, said, "We don't know some of these songs," because they're much younger. I said, "Well, it's not important that you know them." I said, "A lot of people do." And I said, "They're important for all the reasons I just outlined." And I said, "Plus," I said, "if they ever make a movie for it, we already got the soundtrack laid down," and I get a lot of feedback on the quotes and the song quotes, and it's since I write books that are written as literature, I think it really enhances it also to have a lot of literary quotes in the book, and not just gratuitously gathered and thrown in there willy-nilly. Just hopefully, because we usually, especially as I went along, I got more and more careful about this. We'd search and search and search, and or if I didn't remember them, I'd search for a quote that was just right for what I was saying in that chapter. And so that's one reason, we do that. And a guy wrote me from Georgia the other day, he said, "I'd read your books, nothing else, just for the quotes." you put up, what great quotes. He said, I've now written those down, and he said, I pull them out and use them, show people I know these things. And, so, it all works. It just works. Yeah. Any other questions? Or if not, yes, ma'am.
You say you write from your personal memories, but how do you keep from making like false memories?
Yeah.
In your writing, put that in your writing.
Well, I tell you, when you write from memory, I'm blessed, and number one, I have a really good memory of things that happened a long time ago. But if you have integrity when you're writing, you question yourself, am I slanting this? This memory, am I retelling it the way I wanted it to be? And especially when it involves something that happened to you, and so, you just have to police yourself and make sure that you're keeping faith with the reader and with the memory of people that you may be talking about. Even though they're written as fictional characters, they might recognize themselves, and some people do. And a lot of people who I think would really object are no longer with us by either natural or unnatural means due to the lifestyle that they led. But in author forums too, I've had people challenge me about not using the language of the street too. And this bleeds over into what you're asking, because I told them that I said, what we write today is like epitaphs on our tombstone. And so I believe that about profanity, and I believe about being true to the stories you're drawing from memories. And I said, I told them, perhaps you want to be remembered for some of those words you're using, I just choose not to. And a guy in England said, I just edited a big gritty crime drama. It's absolutely essential to use that language. I said, I just wrote a big gritty crime drama, and Criminal Minds endorsed it. I said, no, it's really not. So we have plenty of descriptors at our command to paint pictures with. And I said, it's just not necessary. But some writers just give in, and some writers get lazy, and they substitute, a lot of that stuff for really good, thoughtful, deep writing, rather than dig deep, as I talked about, and really bare their souls. Because all writers, to one extent or another, draw from what they know, and write what they know. But it's a constant thing to police yourself to do that. Thanks, that's great questions. Anybody else? Nobody else? Yes, sir. They came around in those days recruiting. They wanted, and they would bring in, they had this huge influx of young people right out of high school from all across America. And there were some good things with that and some not so good things, because you had a lot of 18-year-olds coming into Washington, D.C., suddenly away from mom and daddy, and all the parties that were going on and everything. But so they recruited me, and I went in to be a fingerprint technician, and went to school for that and did that for a while, and saw right away that that wasn't for me. I couldn't make a living out of that. I wanted to be an agent, and I needed to finish my degree and everything. And it would be a long haul, working at night on a late shift and going to college, and I was impatient, so I decided to come home. It was a great learning experience for me, be out on my own. I remember when I rolled in late at night in Union Station in Washington. We were coming in, and you looked out at the night sky, and you see the Washington Monument all lit up, the Capitol Dome, and you're like, wow. Being from Nettleton, it's like, wow. And and then the hard lessons learned too, being out, not being careful, used to being in the South, out walking around and getting bugged all those times, and I'm just lucky I wasn't killed. And but it was, just a different time. They don't do that anymore so much, because everything, a lot of that work they've had people doing then has been computers do it now, and you had just a totally different world up there inside the agency and everything. But it was something I wouldn't change. I met a lot of great people, and that's where I met, for those of y'all who read the book, that's where I met Dixie, the character in the book, who became Michael's love interest. A big love story behind all of this, and it goes to show you pale, for those of you who hadn't read it. And people ask me about Dixie a lot, who inspired it, and that character, and so on. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Very first thing I did, I think I sat down and just made a few notes of what the book would be about. You know, where it would start, where would it end, and then I went right to find the title. For me, that title was so important, and when I finally found it and decided to commit to it, that was like an anchor. It was like I made a down payment, and now I promised, who knows who I made a promise with, that I would, that I was really going to write this book. And so I think that's probably the first thing I did, and then just began to dive into it, and then found out it was pretty tough. And oh wow, I wish I'd kept some of those first chapters I wrote, because they would have been not so good. And and then you have to find out, well, where do you start, and where do you do? And in the whole process, there were times that I'd write, say, chapter 3, and then I decided it needed to be chapter 23. And the chapter 23 should be chapter 3. So you would move it all around, not just constantly writing and rewriting and editing. And every good writer, I don't care how good or how big they think they are, they all need a great editor. And the editing process almost never ends. You've got to have somebody who's really good with words, who you trust to tell you things you don't want to hear. And to tell you got to give that up. It's not working, or, have you thought about this sentence structure would make it flow better here, and you've got to get over any hurt feelings like, well, that's my baby. You can't tell me. Well, I created that, and good editors will tell you, I couldn't do what you do. I could never sit down and write a book, but I can look at a book and tell you how to make it a little better, so readers won't get bogged down. And one of my weaknesses, which is run-on sentences, I admit it. And one guy said he loved it, but he did find some run-on sentences in it. And I said, well, you should have seen it before we edited it. It was just one big run-on sentence from it. And so, that's a critical thing, is to have somebody who will tell you what you don't want to hear. And I found for my second book, I found a lady in this area who is just a sweetheart and a nice person, so supportive of me. And she has a way with words. But she'd tell me, I can never write a book, but I can help make it better for you. And she just loves she views that she's all a part of the team and the process, and we're blessed to have her, and I trust her when she tells me, look at this. I won't accept everything she says, but I accept most of what she says. Some things I say, well, the reason I wrote it this way is because of this. It's very important to me. Leave it that way. And she'd go, okay. And so, that's what everybody needs. And so you can find some folks out there who are just really good and, pretty affordable too. But they got to make a living too, and some of them do it on the side, some of them do it full time. And it's hard to find them. I found one early on. I tried her through Writer's Digest, and she said, well, send me and I'll show you my style. She sent chapter 1 back to me, and it was just this big glob of wood where she'd rewritten the whole thing. I said, well, maybe not. And so I didn't use her. I don't know if she's trying to impress me how thorough she was, or we decided not to go with that. And then you just work through it, and I found my first editor, and she's passed away now. And she was a sweetheart. I was meant to find her. She was an older lady, retired English instructor, and her husband taught at Northwestern up in Chicago. And she said, she just passed away, but she told me, she said, I shouldn't say this, but I'm telling all my writer friends that she said, you're the best writer I've edited in 25 years. And I needed to hear that then. I needed little pats on the back. I needed that confidence booster. And so she was a sweet lady, and I miss her. She was sweet, and she was right there. God sent her to me when I needed her, and that's what He does too. Any other questions? Okay, I really enjoyed being here. Yes, ma'am.
Will you talk a little bit about Dixie and
Talk about Dixie, what?
about Dixie and her significance?
Oh, about Dixie. Have you read the book?
Yes, sir.
Have you gotten to
I haven't quite finished it all, but I've started.
you got to the traumatic scene in Memphis?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of people got mad at me about that, about the death of Dixie. And somebody who loved the book and was very instrumental in the whole Morgan Freeman thing told me, she said, I love the book, but I'm still mad at you about that. And, I will tell you that in real life, Dixie did not die. Dixie's still alive and well. She came to a lady who was this inspiration for her, came to a book signing I had in Memphis, and she was, humbled that she had inspired this great love story, from 40-something years ago, and everything. So, but I did meet the lady in Washington who we were both young, 18 years old, when she inspired all that, and so that's the way it turned out in the book, is trying to figure out how to deal with that, and it just worked as a story for it to play out that way, and it just fit, and was one of many lessons that Michael will learn along the way in this trilogy. So, did you like the love story between them?
Yeah.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. So, my wife found out an old girlfriend. The first one I'd written about was coming to the book signing in Memphis, and before we left to go to Memphis, she was, I said, "What are you doing, Judy?" And she said, "Well, I got to find just the right outfit to wear. It's not every day an old girlfriend shows up." I said, "All right, guys, that was 45 plus years ago or whatever, And so it was great to see her and talk about those memories and see what had happened to her and what had happened to me and other friends that we knew too. Got the books, and I was reunited with some people who live in Maine now, just all over the country, and so that's the way it is. I meet so many people out on the road, and so many old memories and friendships are rekindled, and when I was in Jackson, some agents from those days showed up at the Memorial bookstore, and they came up to me, and one of them got up close to me, and he whispered to me, he said, "You did change the names in this book, didn't you?" And I said, "Yeah, to protect the innocent and the guilty." And it's really great to hear from some of those people who lived that, and they lived that era with me, and to hear them say good things about the book, about how I treated certain people that I based characters on. That just means the world to me. And one of them's wife is a librarian at Mississippi College, and they picked up the books, and on and on and on. That we get these notes from people who picked it up, and then we all agree. We sit around sometimes and we meet, and we agree. We talk about all the mistakes we made, when we were young and thought we knew it all, and we really didn't know it all. I know this can come as a shock to y'all, but you're going to learn so much from here on out along this journey that y'all are on. And we talk about what we would have done differently, what we would have done the same, and what we all learned, from some of those tough lessons that we had to endure back in those days. Any other questions? I really have enjoyed being here with y'all today, And remember, it's Merle Temple, MERLETEMPLE. So go to Facebook if you'd like to friend me, and please go to Amazon.com and type my name in and leave us a short review there if you haven't read the book or if you like it and everything. Or if you want to put me on an email, on my email list, it's merletemple@bellsouth.net. And we'd love y'all to come over and attend the party that we're going to have. And we hope to have a huge crowd of our gym committee from Criminal Minds here to our little corner of the world and treat him as good as he treated us when we were out there tooling around Hollywood, trying not to get run over on the freeways around LA. Thank y'all for having me. Contact me anytime, anything I can do to help you. That's what the world is about, networking, passing it on. Many people have helped me. I'd love to help y'all. So just feel free. Don't think, oh, he's too busy. He'll never get back to you. I'll get back to you probably much quicker than you think I will. Thank you, and God bless you.
Mr. Cooper will be glad to sign books. We'll be glad to sign your book and answer any other questions, but continue that Itawamba welcome and have a good afternoon.